President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never, ever happen. When I sit down with President Trump, it will be to discuss the future economic and security relationship between two sovereign nations.
For months, I've warned you. America is after our land, our resources, our water, and our sovereignty. This isn't just alarmism. These threats are real. And now, Canada has spoken. Mark Carney has secured a decisive win in what many consider one of the most pivotal elections in Canadian history. His victory wasn't just political, it was personal. It was a bold stand against Donald Trump's escalating tariffs and protectionist tactics. In Carney's words, President Trump wants to break us so America can own us. That will never happen. Backed by widespread anti-Trump sentiment, Canada's Liberal Party surged to victory. Carney's campaign promised Canadians a new era of defiance, an unrelenting defense of national interests and economic sovereignty. The electorate didn't just listen, they rallied. Carney's win sends a thunderous message to both Washington and Ottawa. Canada is done being polite when it's being punished. The age of diplomatic restraint is over. With Trump's tariffs already inflicting billions in losses, Carney promised Canadians he would not fold. Before we dive deeper, be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join our live broadcasts so you stay updated on the most urgent developments shaping North America. Now let's look at the build-up to this confrontation and what's coming next. Earlier this year, the United States hit Canada with sweeping tariffs, 25% on steel and aluminum, 25% on autos, and 10% on energy imports. In response, Canada slapped back with $60 billion in retaliatory tariffs, $30 billion of which remain in effect. But Carney has made it clear, if the United States refuses to negotiate, that retaliation could double to $60 billion, or even balloon to $110 billion. Critics once dismissed these threats. Now they're taking them seriously. So why Carney? Why now? Carney emerged at a time when Canadian manufacturers, still reeling from Trump-era tariffs, were demanding protection. Industries like steel, auto, and aluminum suffered deeply under U.S. policies. Carney's response? A sweeping economic action plan including a $2 billion support fund for the auto sector, strategic investment in supply chains and critical minerals, revenue from customs used to support displaced workers, fast-tracking energy project approvals, new funding for agriculture and small businesses, and a $5 billion annual trade diversification package targeting new markets beyond the U.S. His message was clear. Canada will no longer play defense. The mood across Canada has shifted. What was once calm diplomacy is now a full-throated roar. Canada smash. A metaphor, yes, but a reflection of real anger. Trump's tariffs didn't just hit businesses, they struck a nerve in Canadian identity. Voters asked, why is our closest ally taxing us like a rival? The frustration boiled over. Carney's campaign channeled this outrage into momentum. His slogan, "We won't let Canada be crushed," spoke directly to the economic pain and political fatigue of Canadian voters. Is this risky? Absolutely. Analysts warn of mutual damage if the trade war deepens. But Carney's supporters are unfazed. They believe Canada must stand firm, and they believe Carney's plan to share the pain is both justified and strategic. By taxing U.S. goods, especially in areas like autos and energy, Canada aims to hit back where it hurts. North American auto production is heavily intertwined. Disrupting it would send shockwaves through both economies. Energy, too, is a core trade pillar, with Canada being America's top supplier of oil, gas, and electricity. And yet, Trump's latest threat, a 25% tariff on Canadian imports, has only pushed Canada further from Washington and closer to Europe and Asia. Why is this a big deal? Canada supplies over 50% of U.S. oil imports and most of its imported natural gas. It's also a major source of uranium and electricity. Curtailing that relationship would raise U.S. energy prices and jeopardize supply security. So Carney is looking east. He's aiming to grow Canada's non-U.S. exports by 50% by 2025, strengthening trade ties with Europe and Asia. One key vehicle for this is CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement with the EU. Though only provisionally applied, it's already reduced tariffs on nearly all goods and opened European government contracts to Canadian firms, unlocking a $3.3 trillion market. There's still friction. Some EU nations like Italy and Ireland haven't fully ratified the deal, citing concerns about corporate power, agricultural protections, and sovereignty. But Canada is pushing forward, believing that full CETA ratification is the key to reducing U. Carney is also exploring separate deals with Japan, South Korea, ASEAN, and the Middle East. In energy, Canada is fast-tracking LNG, or liquefied natural gas, exports to Asia. The goal? Redefine Canada's role in global energy markets. Still, some argue that Canada can't fully detach from the U.S. economy. True, nearly 70% of Canadian exports still head south. But Carney's long game is to reduce that to 50 to 55%, giving Canada more bargaining power and economic resilience. Will this be easy? No. Diversification is expensive and politically complex. But Carney's firm tone and the electorate's embrace of it suggests Canadians are ready for the challenge. Trump, of course, may respond by doubling down. Go trade elsewhere. We're the biggest market. You'll come back. Maybe, maybe not. Because Canada's trump card isn't just steel or autos, it's energy. The U.S. depends on Canadian oil, gas, and electricity to keep its economy running and prices stable. Undermining that relationship could have major consequences. So when Carney turns to the European Union or Asia for energy exports, it's not just a trade adjustment, it's a geopolitical shift. Trump's tariff threats have fractured one of the world's most trusted trading relationships, but they've also ignited Canada's drive to build bridges elsewhere. This isn't just about economics, it's about dignity, sovereignty, and Canada's place in the world. So what do you think? Is Carney's tough stance the wake-up call Canada needed? Or will this trade war hurt everyone in the end? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned as we follow this historic transformation in North American trade.
But first, we have breaking news. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is meeting with President Trump at the White House right now. That meeting comes as Trump is escalating his trade war and pushing Canada to become part of the United States. Let's bring in White House correspondent Karen Travers and senior reporter Catherine Falders, along with our business reporter Alexis Christoforous for more. So, Karen, what's President Trump saying ahead of this meeting?
The president posted on his Truth social media platform just minutes before Prime Minister Mark Carney arrived, Diane, and if he is indicating in that post what this meeting might be like, it could be a little tense. As the president says in this post, we don't need their cars, we don't need their energy, we don't need their lumber, we don't need anything they have, referring to Canada. He says other than their friendship, which hopefully we will always maintain. The president says of Canada, they, on the other hand, need everything from us. So certainly indicating a tough posture on trade negotiations and discussions about potentially reducing the tariffs on Canadian imports into the United States. That will be a big topic of conversation, as well as the broader U.S.-Canadian relationship, which has been very tense in recent months, as the president has talked about making Canada the 51st state. He's had tough words about the previous Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, but this is a chance to reset the relationship. Though Mark Carney, Diane, has indicated that he is still willing to play hardball. He's talked about American betrayal and said that Canadians should not forget the lessons of what this administration has done in just a short amount of time.
Canada's push to expand its global energy footprint has led to new resource partnerships, not just with the United States, but with multiple key international markets. But as tensions with Washington grow, one question becomes urgent. How can Canada craft a commodity deal that secures its position with the U.S. and beyond? With U.S. tariffs casting a shadow over the Canadian economy, Ottawa faces a critical decision. The response must be immediate, forceful, and strategic. Canada needs to send a clear message. America's path to energy security and economic resilience runs directly through Canadian cooperation. Centering the economy around key commodities could be the engine of a broader industrial renewal, one that boosts GDP, attracts capital, supports tech advancement, and positions Canada as both a global resource hub and a leader in sustainability. It would also reinforce Canada's value in the North American alliance, making it a cornerstone of Washington's energy and economic framework. This isn't just about shipping raw goods, it's about value creation, rebuilding manufacturing, expanding ancillary services, and promoting cleaner operations, including methane recapture and resource conservation. In short, a commodity-based strategy doesn't mean returning to dig and dump economics. There's also the geopolitical angle. The United States' decision to hit Canadian steel, aluminum, and energy exports with sweeping tariffs, 25% on most and 10% on energy, makes it clear. Canada must diversify its export markets. By doing so, it lowers risk for large-scale investments and opens new doors in Asia and Europe, some of the fastest-growing regions on the planet. Interestingly, Washington's lighter tariff on energy, just 10% compared to 25% elsewhere, is tacit proof of how vital Canadian resources are to U.S. interests. So how exactly do Canadian oil, gas, and electricity serve the United States? Canadian energy enhances America's reserves, supports affordable domestic prices, and enables the United States to ship energy to allies in Europe and Asia. Deeply connected pipeline and power infrastructure across the northern border means that pulling away from Canadian energy would be difficult and expensive. Canadian energy enhances America's reserves, supports affordable domestic prices, and enables the United States to ship energy to allies in Europe and Asia. Deeply connected pipeline and power infrastructure across the northern border means that pulling away from Canadian energy would be difficult and expensive. Despite being an energy powerhouse, the United States is grappling with rising demand from AI-powered data centers and new tech infrastructure. Canadian energy, via seamless delivery systems, can help meet U.S. demand while freeing up American reserves for strategic exports without triggering domestic price hikes.
I think it's important that we get to an outcome that involves removing the tariffs very soon. Everything is on the table, but when we're talking about sort of non-tariff retaliation, it could be about restricting supply, it could be putting our own export duties on products. It could be energy and minerals, it could be broader than that, but certainly, you know, the strategic nature, particularly of critical minerals, makes it one of the more obvious targets, because the alternative for the United States to actually get it is from China. There's a certain amount that you can ship by rail, but by and large, you couldn't displace the 4 million barrels that we send to the United States in pipelines. But I would say it works on the other side of the bucket too. So the refineries in the Midwest and in the Gulf Coast are set up to use heavy crude. The United States doesn't produce much heavy crude. It's mainly light sweet crude. And so in order to displace Canadian crude from those refineries, you would basically have to retrofit them all, which would be tens of billions of dollars and probably 5 to 10 years of work. So I actually think the oil that's coming down here is pretty sticky, in the sense that I don't think it's displaceable. And so in that regard, I don't think the threat to Canada's producers in the oil sector is as significant as perhaps in other sectors.
Canadian heavy crude is already critical. It accounts for 24% of total U.S. oil consumption and is processed in U.S. refineries specifically designed for it, especially in the Midwest. Switching away from this supply would mean costly reconfigurations or relying on more unstable suppliers like Venezuela or the Middle East. Recent upgrades to the Trans Mountain Pipeline have tripled Canada's capacity to reach overseas markets. Countries like South Korea and Japan are already eyeing Canadian oil as a reliable source. Likewise, Canada's natural gas, already covering 9% of U.S. consumption, has ample room to grow. With 6 West Coast LNG projects underway, including Phase 1 of LNG Canada going live this year, Canada is set to ship up to 6.26 billion cubic feet of LNG daily. This would rank it among the top 5 LNG exporters worldwide. Canadian energy's role doesn't stop at oil and gas. Clean electricity from Canada is increasingly powering U.S. homes, businesses, and high-tech industries. Projects like Hydro-Quebec's transmission line to New York are expected to supply 20% of NYC's electricity, saving residents up to $17 billion over 30 years. Over 30 interconnections link Canadian and U.S. grids, making Canada a critical part of American grid stability and capacity expansion, with AI-driven data centers expected to consume 12% of all U.S. electricity by 2028, up from just 4.4% in 2023. This partnership is only becoming more essential. Now enter Mark Carney. His election victory is about more than leadership. It's a statement of Canadian pride and defiance. Voters embraced him as the candidate who stood firm against Trump's aggressive tariffs. He promised concrete support for affected industries and unveiled a sweeping $5 billion plan to diversify trade with Asia-Pacific, Europe, and other regions. Carney's focus includes expanding domestic manufacturing, revamping supply chains in autos, energy, and critical minerals, strengthening economic independence, and targeting alternative markets for growth. Meanwhile, the threat to the U.S. is real. Canada's current $30 billion in retaliatory tariffs could double, or even reach $110 billion, if no agreement is struck. Trump faces a choice: sit down with Carney or risk significant political fallout from inflation, supply chain disruptions, and industry backlash. The stakes are high. Some U.S. industries, like autos and energy, rely heavily on Canadian imports and fear market closures. Others back Trump's tariffs. This division could trigger domestic pressure within the U.S. political system. Scenario 1, no deal. Both economies take a hit. Car manufacturing, energy prices, and supply chains suffer. Inflation surges. The foundation of North American free trade could crack. Scenario 2, a compromise. Carney might win limited tariff relief and position it as a Canadian victory. Trump could present it as a mutually beneficial step back, but both leaders are known for resisting compromise. Looking back, Trump's America First doctrine led to protectionist tariffs across strategic sectors, from steel to autos. Canada wasn't spared. Trump frequently threatened NAFTA, and Trudeau's cautious diplomacy offered little payoff. Canadian industries were battered and public sentiment shifted. Carney seized on this frustration. His campaign took a tough stance, promising to raise tariffs and demand respect. He made it clear, Canada would no longer tolerate being economically undermined, even by its largest trading partner. His message resonated. Canadians rallied around the idea that they wouldn't bow to unfair trade pressure, no matter how powerful the opponent. And Carney now holds a public mandate to escalate if necessary. The current $30 billion in retaliatory tariffs are just the beginning. If Trump doesn't respond with meaningful dialogue, Carney is prepared to push back harder, $60 billion, then $110 billion. This isn't just a negotiation, it's a turning point. If the US and Canada can't find common ground, they risk a fracture unlike anything seen in modern trade history. Both economies would bleed. But Carney has successfully recast this risk as a test of independence and sovereignty. So what lies ahead? Either the trade war will escalate to new and dangerous levels, or we'll witness a high-stakes negotiation between two of North America's most determined leaders. One thing is certain, the era of business as usual in Canada-US relations is over. For more insights on the happenings in the political world and globally, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to our channel.